this is so much at the heart of pretty much all the mystic traditions I've looked into. All the teachers that I really respect kind of point back towards this part again and again and again. It's like, can we sit in the tension of that paradox and just be with that? And I really feel like that's, in many ways, that's what this moment is asking us to do, like that we're in as a human species. And like the paradox for me of needing to act, but also recognizing that it's like in the actually slowing down and like listening and making space and sitting in that tension where something completely different has the possibility of arising out of us that the very limited human imagination could probably not ever even begin to create.
Welcome to the Passing Through podcast, a show dedicated to exploring those spaces not just within, but also between and around us. The cracks in the walls, the moments between the moments. I speak with thinkers, authors, artists, teachers, and everyday humans who have touched the edge of the ordinary and found something to bring back. When you think of plant medicine, one of the first things you think of is probably ayahuasca, an intensely psychedelic, kaleidoscopic weekend full of hallucination and vomiting that's hopefully accompanied by profound shifts in consciousness. You may know someone who's attended an ayahuasca ceremony, or you yourself may have even attended one or more. But you probably haven't heard the stories of someone who studied with indigenous Shipibo people of the Peruvian Amazon. This week's guest spent 5 years in the jungle, embedded in an animist culture, undergoing plant dietas, while learning medicine songs called Icaros, as she deepened her understanding of both plant intelligence and the ancient practice of Amazonian Curanderismo. And if that wasn't interesting enough, Skye is a grief ritualist. She studied with previous guest of this show, Frances Weller. She's a facilitator in Experiential Deep Ecology, which was popularized by Joanna Macy and John Seed, another previous guest of this show. She's also studied with Bayo Akumalafe and Josh Schrei of the Emerald Podcast, who are both, you guessed it, previous guests and ancestors of this show. Skye currently co-facilitates Josh's year-long study group, the Mythic Body, and leads her own events focused on reclaiming animist perception, developing mythic imagination, and helping people reconnect to the living, breathing, more than human world all around us. She leads various study groups on practical animism, grief work, and as a nature connection mentor, folk herbalist, plant medicine ritualist, and naturalist, she's someone who spends a lot of time outdoors, in ritual, or in focused practice on the land. Honestly, I can't think of a more fitting guest than Skye. This was one of my favorite conversations on the show, and I hope you enjoy it too. I'm really grateful that this podcast affords me the opportunity to speak to people like Skye. So thanks for listening and for helping to make all of this possible. If you enjoy this conversation, please go check out her website, deepearthdreaming.world, and her lovely writing, which I'll include links to in the show notes. She has an upcoming plant intelligence study group that's starting, and I strongly encourage you to try to attend. I'll have links to that in the show notes as well. In fact, I will put a bunch of links to things that we speak about or refer to in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. This was a rich and fascinating conversation that I really think you're going to enjoy. So without further delay, let's get to the conversation. So Skye, welcome to the Passing Through podcast. It is great to sit down with you.
Really good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, I was very excited to speak to you because you have studied with at least 4 of the previous guests of this podcast. So you've studied with John Seed, Bio, Francis Weller, Josh Fry.
Yep.
So these are all people that I really love, and you do too. So I'm really excited to see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah, I've been going through your archives, and very many of the people you talk to are people I really respect, and so looking forward to going through some of your older conversations. Yeah.
It's rare to speak with somebody that has such a kindred sensibility. I feel like your interests are very, very, very aligned with mine, except that you are deeper. You're further along the path. So it's a treat to talk to you, because I'm sure you could answer some questions that I have as more of a novice or someone who's a bit greener on the path. So it's exciting to have some time with you.
Yeah, as you've been talking to other people and I've been listening, I'm like, oh yeah, you ask great questions, and I have wanted to be in the conversation with you with a bunch of these people. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And I was thinking of doing something a little bit differently for the beginning of this episode, because usually I'll have a question. Sometimes it's an oddball question.
Yeah,
we could be talking about the color of chicken eggs and things like that at the beginning. But I thought maybe instead I could, if you're open to it and you have something that you are interested in, something that maybe is pulling at you or something that is alive, we could have you introduce something. But if not, I also have something somewhere I could take us.
I love that. Yeah. Great way to begin. Actually do. I almost always do. I'm one of those people who has like a passionate thread, and it's very hard for me to do anything else except pull on that thread. And so my current passionate thread is dreams. I've always been interested in dreams, but I'm feeling like I'm doing quite a deep dive. So I'm on my 3rd dream book at the moment, and doing an online course on dreaming, and I'm part of 2 different dream groups, and like that is the thread that I'm really feeling at the moment. Yeah. So.
Okay, amazing. I'm happy to dig into that, because dreams are something that are endlessly fascinating to me as well. I mean, we spend a 1/3 of our lives bathed in dream. So
Totally.
it's a rich place. So yeah, let's go there. So when you speak of dreams in this context, are we curious about the significance of dreams? Like what's happening when we dream, where we're going when we dream, this type of stuff? Are we being dreamed?
All of the above. What I'm really interested in, like I've been diving down, getting into the foundations of the Jungian dream analysis frameworks, and I've just finished Robert Johnson's book, Inner Work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, where he covers in the first part of the book basically the Jungian foundation of dream work, and then the second half of the book is active imagination, which he calls a high art, which I just love. And so, yeah, kind of getting a grasp and a kind of fuller understanding of the way that the Jungians have been working with dreams. I do enjoy the analysis and figuring out what in the unconscious is speaking to us through symbol and following that thread and letting it unravel. And I think where it gets really exciting for me is the way that kind of framework or way of approaching dreams comes together with more of like an animist way of perceiving dreams. Because for your viewers who don't know me, which is probably most people, I spent 5 years living in the Peruvian Amazon, apprenticing full-time with a Shipibo. Curanderismo is like the traditional folk medicine of the Shipibo. And we do a lot of work, very big, in-depth work with plants, and they're famous for their work with ayahuasca, but, that's really the tip of the iceberg. They do so much more, like their traditions are so vast. And part of their traditions is this practice called dieta, where we go off into the jungle in isolation and silence, and we work with a particular plant. An example could be rose, lavender, like for them it was jungle plants, obviously. And so one of the ways that those plants start to teach you is through your dreams. In fact, that's like the primary way. And so that's a totally different way of understanding a dream, right? Like that is dream as the doorway, as the channel for animate relationship to take place. It is where that animate relationship happens. It's either in the visionary states that the ayahuasca opens up, or it's in these kind of active imaginal states that Jung describes as well in the daytime, through just like deep meditation, silence, fasting, repetitive beat or music will open up these states spontaneously in the daytime, where plants can speak to you. And then the main channel is dreams. And there's all these ways in which, in the beginning of a training, your teacher will be like, hey, what did you dream last night? And speak to you about how whatever you're dreaming, which may seem completely unrelated to a plant, it's not like they arrive there and they're like, hi, I'm Rose, I'm here to, it is still very symbolic, but it's not viewed strictly as something that's coming up from the personal unconscious. It's something that it's a way to be in communication and relationship with other than humans. And so I feel like my interest at the moment is having actually both frameworks and finding the way that they come together and how they marry. And there is a bit of tension there, which is similar to, I guess, the tension that would come up in like the psychedelic psychotherapy movement, where we have folks who are kind of saying that everything that comes up in the psychedelic experience is the personal unconscious, versus like a more indigenous traditional view where you're actually in communication and relationship with the other than humans through the vehicle of the visionary state, So for me, it's like a micro version of that, like in the nighttime, and it happens every single night. And yeah, I love that tension and like that feeling of like, me, not me, like not wanting to kind of disregard the personal unconscious, and then simultaneously not wanting to over externalize and like not take responsibility for what's arising in those states, And so, yeah, just treading that fine line, that balance point between the two is my passion right now. That's where I'm feeling excited. Yeah.
Thank you for that. This is a rich topic here. There's 6 different things that sprung up as you were speaking, and it's tricky to figure out which way to go, but I guess I'll just pick one.
Yeah. Totally.
I love this animist sense of dreaming and seeing this liminal state as a way to be in relationship and communication with non-human beings.
Yeah.
And also what you're saying here about how this is also accessible in waking states, through trance, through repetitive action, song, dance, rattling, these types of things, and how these can open us up to these non-ordinary kinds of communication.
Yeah.
And the first thought that came to me is, because this is so well documented in the anthropological record, you look at indigenous peoples everywhere, and this is commonplace, even commonplace for people to transform into animals or commune with animals, not just plants, right? So, I mean, it's very porous, very strange, very liminal. This is the kind of stuff that I love because it's real, and at the same time, it feels so unreal. It's this paradoxical thing. And in your perspective, what is it about the human mind under like normal, in quotes, states of consciousness that makes it harder for us to access these kinds of communications?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very rich territory, and it's a good question. Like, I run these study groups of the work of Stephen Howard Buhner. Are you familiar with him? He's like this.
I've seen his work on your blog, which I love, and I recommend listeners to check out, but I'm going to have to read him. I've made notes to check him out based on how much you've quoted him and how much I like what you've quoted, so I really need to check him out.
Yeah, I mean, he's the massive inspiration of mine. He's since passed away quite recently, and his whole body of work is kind of around this. It's exploring what, in the words of Josh Fry, animism is normative consciousness, which is an episode of The Emerald I really recommend all folks check out. It's kind of, some of the other students of Josh and I joke about how it's one of the gateway episodes to The Emerald,
That was my first episode, yeah.
Was it? Yeah, it's the one I recommend to everyone. And anyone who comes and does work with me, I'm like, listen to Animism is Normative Consciousness. So Stephen Howard Buhner was a poet, a deep ecologist, a bardic naturalist, and just an incredible, wise green man. And his whole passion was this. It was exploring how, if animism is normative consciousness, if we accept that, why is it that we do not experience that for those of us in the West, Part of it, I think, is to do with our kind of stories that impact worldview and perception. So, or what John Seed, who was one of your recent guests, would talk about, like anthropocentrism and human exceptionalism. That is like the foundational bedrock of Western culture. Humans are separate and superior to the rest of the natural world. We treat it as a sewer or a resource, or basically uninteresting if it isn't one of those two things. And this is also something that Joanna Macy spoke about a lot. And this is like the beginning of the deep ecology process. And Stephen Herbalist's work is investigating this. It's really like understanding the water that we swim in, that so many of us take for granted and never take the time to actually explore. And the way that it impacts perception, the way that it impacts behavior, and what we even believe is possible. And so something that Stephen said is that if you look at it, like we have these sensory gating mechanisms within our awareness where culture and family give us this story about what the world is. And then we start, our perception from a very young age starts organizing around this dominant story. And so most children, I have a 3-year-old right now, most children are natural animists. They're spontaneously animistic. And, something that Stephen Buhner said was they need to be actively trained out of that perception. And I really feel that this is true. One of my other jobs before I became a mother a few years ago was as a nature connection mentor for young children between 3 and 5. And 3 to 5-year-olds are like full-on animists if they're given the space and the freedom to express that, right? And so he was saying that, from 5 to 7, the average Westerner is experiencing their sensory gating narrowing and narrowing and narrowing to, by the time we reach, teenage or early adulthood, we are experiencing the world that we are expecting to experience. And this was really powerful for me because what happened for me is that I was a bit of like a free-range kid. I grew up on a farm in South Africa, went to an alternative school. My parents let me like run wild a lot. I was also voracious in reader of fantasy books like Tolkien and like Dune and Plan of the Cave, like all of that. Like I was just always taking in all these amazing stories, myth and folklore as well. And feeling like that kind of animist spirit didn't shut down quite as much as it did for my peers. And then grew up in a full-on atheist materialist household. And the two worldviews clashed massively and resulted in this like existential crisis. And I feel like many of us experience this on some level, but maybe so young that it's not really fully in awareness. But I feel like I wasn't able to actually effectively shut it down in such a way that it created a lot of friction for me. And resulted in me going and drinking ayahuasca at a very young age and moving to Peru and living with a community that were fully animist and like realizing there, like the way that we've been, or the way that I've been taught what the world is, what's possible, what's real, what's unreal, is just one version. And here's a community that has a totally different experience and getting having the privilege of being able to see a whole group of people live that differently day in and day out while drinking plant medicines that I feel are like naturally, if you're in the right environment, naturally bring us back to that original open-gated perception. So yeah, the stories are a big one, and then like some kind of like communal resonance, I would say, like culturally, like it's not safe, to think outside of the limitations of your culture or your community normally, and I feel like we're wired to kind of bring our kind of perceptual norms to that of the community that we're embedded in. And that was really clear to me when I moved from Peru back to, full-blown Western culture. I now live in Melbourne, Australia. And it is like so the opposite of that community in every way. And how much harder it is for me to kind of stay in the open sensory gates, which I've come to call the elemental self, and how the whole culture resonates my perception and my way of being into what I call citizen mode. It's like there's a particular mode where sensory gates are narrow and got to get shit done. And like, we're here to produce, man. Like, isn't that what we're here for? You know, like, and that mentality is the water, and you just can't help resonating to the water. So for us, it's like, I see now it's about creating these little like microcultures of connection and other kinds of perception, and starting to like, islands of coherence, I've heard it called, which I really resonate with. Yeah.
Thanks for that. That I think is a beautiful answer. The stories there are huge for us, right? They constrain and limit and narrow our, not just our perception, but our understanding of what's possible, as you said. And this emphasis by our culture to be citizens, be productive workers, consume, produce, that is a damaging thing. And it feeds into this thing that you're talking about safety, because it enforces the story. And it makes it unsafe to challenge the story or to express things that may run contrary to the story, where you'll be shamed by your peers, you'll be laughed at, you'll be ridiculed. There will be some sort of social sanction that happens as a result. So thanks for drawing attention to all of that, because I could imagine even some of my friends listening to this conversation, or my family even, and being like, what? They're talking about dreams and mythical energies and plant medicines, and what is this? It's hippie bullshit, you know? Like, I could hear people saying this, and you know, that's valid, I guess. You could say that's just another story. Like, sure, I could take the criticism, but what if there is something to that story? I guess is where I'd like to dig us in deeper, because there does seem to be something suggestive in the cultural anthropology that says that there is something here. And maybe to get us into that, we can go into how you got from South Africa to the Peruvian Amazon, to kind of one of the heart centers of this animist relational worldview. How did that happen? How did you get there?
I'm going to take the rest of this call to tell the whole story, so I'll have to make it brief. Yeah, so well, like I described, I growing up on the farm in South Africa that I grew up on, and having that very strong natural instinct toward animist consciousness. Oh, and I'll just say quickly, like, all of these are stories, of course, and they're all valid. And for myself and a lot of other people I know, when we kind of open into what we're calling right now animist perception, there is a feeling state that comes along with that, which is like, okay, I'm home. Like, this is how things actually are. There's an actual like feeling of rightness that comes along with that expansion of those gates. And so, yeah, like, people must take what they want from that, but there's an undeniable sense, and I've seen this happen for now hundreds of people over many years. And so it's something that I've seen over and over again, which seems to align with the research that Josh speaks to in Animism as Normative Consciousness. Like, 100% of cultures before ours were animist. 100%.
You know, it's an interesting thing. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's a great observation of this feeling state that accompanies animist perception. What would you say the feeling state is for the modernist citizen mode? Because one comes up immediately to me when I heard you say that. I was like, oh my God, yep, there's a feeling state for that one.
Could you describe it?
Yeah, for me, it's fear, it's a sense of stress, and a sense of being crushed, like held down under a foot, or placed in some really tight confines of like certain roles and expectations, and this is the way that things should be. It's like a straitjacket feeling.
Yes, I would say that for sure. And there's a kind of forward momentum to it. Like, for me, what I was describing is like the elemental perception is there's a kind of like, there's a sinking openness to it, and like a expansion of self. Like, there's a sense of like porosity and like I am taking up my larger body. I'm kind of like opening into my larger body. Whereas, as you described, there's a kind of narrowness to the citizen mode and a forward momentum to it, and like a closing down, which I don't want to demonize that, actually, and this is something that I talk about in my study groups with Stephen Howard Buhner's work, and it's something that Francis Weller talks about in his work as well, like bless the shutdown, like we actually, the capacity to do that is what allows us to survive in the world that we're living in, like to be in that expanded, elemental, like open sensory gated state is just not conducive to the life that most of us are living. And so having the flexibility, which is something that Buhner talked about a lot, and something I really appreciate about his work, is he's talking about actually having the flexibility to open and to close as needed. And the problem isn't that we get into citizen mode, it's that we get stuck there, or that we feel that is the only way, as opposed to like it is just one of the ways that we can move through life, and that there's actually these other ways of being. And when I'm in a conditions conducive to that, can I open myself in that way, and like that for me is, I think, more of my practice and goal. And when we do the Stephen Howard Buhner study groups called Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm, that's what we focus on practically, like opening and closing, as needed, and really honoring the shutdown. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And sorry to divert you from the direction you were going, but I thought it was an interesting thing that you said, so I wanted to grab it while it was there.
Yeah, no, I welcome you diverting it at any point. The original question was, how did I get to the jungle? Basically an existential crisis. An existential crisis got me to the point where I was feeling intense anxiety around the life that I was being kind of told that I needed to live. There was a strong feeling of like, this isn't real. This isn't the full truth here. And yet being kind of reflected the opposite, like, all right, school's nearly finished. Now it's time to go to university. Here's the list of things that you can study. And then you'll go, like I just was like, oh, it feels really too small. There wasn't anyone in my family of religious or spiritual orientation whatsoever, very materialist family. So the sense of meaningless and I guess nihilistic doom hanging over my consciousness growing up. And in the face of that, also coming to grips with impermanence. Like I feel like a lot of my teenage peers were not really interested or taking much notice of that. But for some reason, I don't understand why. And I've always been this way. I was like, dudes, like we're all going to die. Like this, like all of you, and you don't know when it's going to happen and you don't know how it's going to happen. And this is also going to happen to everyone including the planet and the sun. Like, why isn't anyone talking about this? And why aren't we all freaking out? It was like very much my teenage orientation in the scene of like drinking and partying and people trying to find partners. And I'm like this is whack. And then a friend of mine went on a gap year. He was a couple of years older than me. And back then, like hardly anyone knew about ayahuasca and plant medicine. But through a friend of a friend, he heard about it, ended up going to Peru, working with some medicine on retreat, ayahuasca particularly, and then came back and he was like, you've got to go. A very close friend of mine. He's like, this crisis you're in, he's one of the few people who knew about the crisis. Like, this is what you need. And I was like, okay. My grandmother passed just like a year before from cancer, left me a bit of money, not much, enough to get a flight to Peru at 16 years old and buy myself entry into a retreat. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to spend it on. And my parents said yes. They let me do it. And so I went, and it totally changed my experience of what life is, what reality is, what is possible in the most radical way, basically, in a way that I'm still living into. This was 22 years ago. Yeah, I'm still living into what happened on that retreat, basically. Yeah, and I got a very I had a really strong feeling that I needed to come back from that and explore more deeply. But I was explicitly told in a ceremony to go and study Chinese medicine first. And so that's what I did. I went from that experience, I went back to South Africa, enrolled in a Chinese medicine program and did that for a few years. And then after that, I went back to Peru, found some teachers and then spent 5 years there. And thought I was going there to learn how to run ayahuasca ceremonies. I was like, this is what this is about. And it totally, like, that was just such a small part of it. It was about so much more than that. And one of the big things that it was about was this recognition of animist perception and like the contrast of the stories of this culture that I was studying within and the culture that I'd come from. And then these technologies of, being in relationship with the world, in a very direct way. Yeah. That's the short story, the very short story.
Yeah, thank you. That's great for setting some context. And really, I think communicating the gravity of that situation, not only in terms of the existential crisis that you were having, and what you were feeling about the world and how it works and your place in it and the nature of world, but also from a relational family perspective, what that must have been like for the family also, to be like, okay, we're going to send you across the world on a plane. Did they know what happens in the ceremony?
Yeah. I mean, to the extent you can be without actually doing it yourself, which you just can't be really. But yeah, my friend came over and said, I've been to the center. This is what she's going to be doing. My father was one of those acid hippies, even though he was very materialist, like back in the 70s.
Okay.
So he was like, she'll be fine. My mom was worried and just, I was a very headstrong teenager and I was also 2 years ahead at school. So when my peers were all 18, we were all finished school already. And it was like, well, all my peers were going off on their gap years and to do their thing. And this was my money. And I guess they felt like they had to treat me like my peers, like an 18-year-old who was choosing what to do. So they, I know I'm lucky in that regard. Very, very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's great to connect with you in this way and learn about these more kind of intimate experiences. So thank you for being willing to share them.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
The question that comes to me is, when you went to study the Chinese medicine and then you returned to the jungle with the intention of being there for 5 years in a much more, I guess, intensive and immersive, determined, dedicated sort of practice, did you find that what you learned under Chinese medicine gave you some sort of foundation to help you deepen into what would later happen in the jungle?
Oh, 100%. I would say it was the lens that I kind of took. So basically, I guess I should explain, I imagine folks who haven't been to the jungle probably think of it as we're all just sitting together in a ceremony, just drinking medicine and like journeying in our own minds, like is the case for lots of us in the West, but it's very different. Like the tradition there is much that as a curandero, you are a very active role in the participant's healing journey. Like you go through an entire apprenticeship, which is what my 5 years was, which is like a fraction of what some people do. Like I have friends who did 10 years and longer, like mine was a relatively short apprenticeship actually, where you learn energetic, vocal, invocational skills and techniques through your relationship with other plants, non-psychedelic plants. So through these dietas I was telling you about briefly before. And then, through the connection with certain trees and certain plants, they give you songs called icaros, which are like medicine songs that are spontaneous and like personal to you and your relationship with these plants. Like the deeper you build a relationship with these other plants, the richer your kind of medicine toolkit is, in a sense, in the ceremony. And then you sing and you work with people energetically in the ceremony through the medium of icaros, through songs. And like the songs are like invoking these plants that you've been working with in dieta. They're invoking ancestors. They're invoking like healing energies and medicines, basically. And they're cleaning, they're clearing, they're untying, they're getting rid of, they're shedding, they're dissolving. These are all themes we study in the Mythic Body. So much of what we study in the Mythic Body is actually happening in a ceremonial state through the medium of the song. And the Chinese medicine was a kind of lens through which I was seeing people in those like ceremonial states, like, oh, there's a bit of like excess here, or these meridians are blocked, and like energetically moving towards like there was a whole way that my awareness of what was moving for people in ceremony was kind of contextualized by that earlier experience. And I didn't go as deep into Chinese medicine as I wanted to. Like, the laws in South Africa changed. I planned to do a full 7-year apprenticeship actually, and I only got 3 years in because they decided, oh, if you're going to do it traditionally, like I was doing, then you have to then go and study to be an actual medical doctor afterwards in order to practice legally. And I was like, okay, wow. Not going to do that, can't afford to do that. So 3 years in is like not as deep as I wanted to go, and I will stop here and I will go straight to the jungle. And yeah, I feel like that was an amazing foundation to have. And then we also do a lot of work with people outside of ceremony. Again, like, ceremony is just a small part of a person's treatment process. Like, people receive body work, they take herbal medicines, so folk medicine, herbal medicine is a big part of it. Like behavioral change. Like, there's so many things that are kind of used to help support people come back into balance and wellness. And the Chinese medicine techniques fitted perfectly in that. Actually, the Shipibo have their own bodywork techniques, and you could see certain kind of connections or similarities in the way that they were perceiving imbalances. And it was great to have that language. I'm so grateful for that. So yeah.
Amazing. The story is so fascinating to me. I feel like I want to just keep deepening into it a little bit. So maybe we can peel another layer back in this, because this concept of singing songs that are given to you by a non-human energy, by a plant, is just fascinating. It's inherently fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And also that plant understands that the universe is vibrational, and that the way to work with certain energies is through song and vibration. And can you maybe talk about that? Because that's like, this whole thing is a huge, interesting topic to me.
I can. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So thanks for asking that question. Very few people do. It is so fascinating to me as well. And it's something that I feel like when I speak to my partner, because I met my partner in the Peruvian Amazon, and we work together, and I'm very fortunate that we can talk about this stuff together. He's one of the few people who gets it in my world, and we both reflect on like the animist perception, and then this part that you've just spoken to as like the hidden riches or gold or heart of that whole experience. Like, ayahuasca, great part of it, but like this is where it is. So yeah, essentially, dieta, going back to dieta is what makes a Shipibo curandero a curandero. Like, you have to have dietas. So again, I'll just explain. It's this process of going out into ideally quite an isolated place. Like, we were in the Peruvian Amazon. There's often these little huts called tambos where you can be away from other people because you're very energetically open and porous, and ideally you're not talking to other people or interacting with them outside of what is necessary for you to survive, exchange of food or chatting with your teacher about some issue you might be having. But other than that, you're pretty much isolated, and your full focus is on a particular plant that you're going to be learning from. So, a popular plant in the Peruvian Amazon that's like quite common for folks to start off with early on in their journey is a plant called bobinsana. And so, say, for example, I'm going to go and learn from bobinsana, go isolation, and then begin by fasting and clearing out and shedding and really dissolving. Like, we also take purgative medicines to clear our bodies, which cause us to, throw up and sweat and have, clearing out our guts. And then from that place of being really clean, we start drinking an extract of this medicine. And then during the day, we are sitting with the plant as much as we can, the actual physical body of the plant. We will bathe in the plant. We'll make a little flower bath with it, like a plant bath with it, and bathe our bodies with it. You make offerings, you enter into ritual, you sing, like, and basically the whole time you're just like opening, asking for the plant to come to you in your dreams or in your waking visions during the day and start to teach you. And it can take time. Like, actually, like, having a successful dieta is harder than a lot of people imagine it would be. You really have to open yourself. You have to make the space for it. You have to slow down. You have to listen. And for many of us, it's like learning to listen through this doorway of the heart-connected, sensory-connected imaginal, which most of us have learned to completely denigrate, ignore, you know. So it takes time. It takes time to open that up again and to learn to trust that. And once you trust it, to actually like move with it and flow with it. But the fruit of this experience, which can last anywhere from 7 days to a year, like, you know, my teachers talked about doing dietas for a year or 2 years where you're like totally isolated from the community. And just also to say you can do a dieta with the plant over and over again. You know, like maybe you begin with Bobbin Sana and it's like not much happened, you know, or you met her in a dream, but other than that, that was it. It was like the door opened a little bit and then you maybe go back and you do another one and you go a bit deeper. But the fruit of this is this kind of energetic ikaro, this like, it's like the relationship that you've built starts to move through you in the form of song and so vibration. And in the Shipibo tradition, it's a bit different from some of the other traditions in the sense that we don't normally get given like a song with all the words. We usually get given like a particular melody, rhythm, and then that kind of holds the frequency of your relationship with this plant. And then in the ceremony, if I'm sitting in front of you, for example, and I start singing this ikaro and I start calling in Bobbin Sana, then the words that I'm singing will be very specific to what I'm seeing in you in that moment and what's energetically happening in the process between us. So I might be singing the same melody today and it's all about cleaning you out and opening the doors of your visionary state and connecting you and like raising you up so that you can start experiencing your own visions. Or like another time I might be singing that same melody to another person and like doing something completely different energetically, and the words will reflect that. So it's completely spontaneous lyrical word work in the moment, but the melody holds the energetic of the plant. And so, yeah, and also you can actually invoke other plant dietas with that same melody as well. So if I get given a melody from Bobbin Sana, like it's like it came to me through that dieta, but can actually be used as a kind of pathway for other dietas to also join Bobbin Sana in that work, in the ceremony. And yeah, it's very like things happen with your voice and the way that the melody moves in ceremony. It's living. It's like the song is alive in a way that it's hard to describe. It's like when you hear other people sing like beautiful songs that they've learned off by heart, it's still beautiful and invocational and will bring things up for people and move things because music always does, you know. But there's a quality or there's a vibratory quality, and the Shipibos talk about this all the time. Like an ikaro, like a real ikaro, has a quality to it, which is specific to you because of your dieta. So if you listen to a recording of me singing an ikaro that I was given, it wouldn't necessarily have that same quality because you don't have the dieta, right? And so it's that kind of like gets the medicine moving in ceremony. And so our job in that role is to like move the energetics of the ceremony and like create the space of alchemy through song via this potency from your plant dietas. So it's kind of like them working through you, singing through you, enacting through you. And that's really important because my teachers would always say, you don't have the capacity to do that. Like the plants do that. Like you're just the vehicle, you know, which I love. I love that because it feels like you're kind of consciousness is on the periphery and there's all these things happening and that you're like constantly being surprised by. And like your ego is kind of like watching from the sidelines while the plants do all this work, It's an amazing process. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's wonderful for maintaining a sense of humility for the practitioner as well, to understand that this isn't me. I'm just I'm lending my voice so the plant can vibrate the air with it and do the magic that it needs to do.
Well, one thing I'll just add quickly is that part of your job is then also to maintain the clarity. So as a practitioner, you have to continuously do dietas and go through clearing processes so that you're moving distortions out of the way so that the plants can use you effectively. And that's a big part of, it's a big part of that work and that training. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm loving this conversation because I see strong parallels between the method that I practice, which is, came from the West. It's not as interesting as this type of stuff, but I see parallels where there's a strong emphasis on emptiness and doing things to keep yourself empty so that, we say like the spirit of community, or I don't like that term, but people seem to, so it communicates the thing. I like more, there's some energetic force, whether that's an animating force or whatever it is, some healing wisdom, some vibratory stuff, whatever. When you're empty, you allow it to move through you. And so I like to hear that it's a similar concept in this work. But what was fascinating to me about your story was that this idea of choosing a plant, and is it a sense of that the plant chooses you when you're looking for the plant, or you choose it? Because I would imagine some plants might not want to be chosen, or they may not be hospitable towards humans. Maybe some plants are vengeful and they say, what the fuck are you doing? Get out of the jungle. You're destroying the planet. I hate you. Does that happen? Like, do plants have these types of personalities?
So basically how it normally happens if you're doing a traditional apprenticeship is that your teacher will actually choose for you in the beginning, like based on what they're perceiving in the ceremonial space. There's certain plants that are considered like beginners plants in the sense that they are energetically quite safe, they're soft, like dietas can overpower you if you haven't developed the capacity to hold them. And so you would want to start slow and plant with plants that are safe for the beginners. So in the beginning, it's rare for people to choose their own plant, in my experience. Now that people are like listening to podcasts like this and like, I'm going to go and like choose my own plant, like people, like traditional teachers are starting to allow Westerners to do that more and more. But when I was there, like almost no one chose their plant in the beginning. Like almost everyone I know had that chosen. And there's certain plants that are considered off bounds, like not that you can't diet with them, but they would only be reserved for people who are really experienced and can hold these like really strong energetics of certain plants. There's certain plants that are known to have like very potent protective qualities, but then at the same time, a lot of plants that are strong for protection have a lot of what they call in that tradition shitana. It's kind of like defensive energy. So imagine like a rose has thorns, or a plant that has like white sap that can be like corrosive on the skin. Plants have their own protections. And so that kind of protection energetically, it becomes what's known as shitana, which can accumulate and start to cause bad luck and all kinds of not good stuff for you as a practitioner. And so part of the journey is starting with plants that have less shitana, and your teacher like teaching you how to notice that in your ceremonial space and clear that. And then as you learn how to do that for yourself and as you build capacity, then you might be able to work with certain plants. And then other plants are considered totally off limits, either because they're not interested in working with humans, which there's lots of plants that don't want to for whatever reasons. And, other plants that are not only safer, but they actually just want to work with us more. Those are known as the master or teacher plants. And it's not because other plants don't have the capacity to do that, but it's just they're not interested. And then, of course, there's the category of plants that are reserved for what we would call brujos, like black magic practitioners. And again, all plants have all aspects to them, but they might be quite hard to work with without being dominated in that way, without being overtaken. And so, yeah, that would be like a no-no. There's also traditions, which is actually one of the traditions that I studied within, where there's like one tree that you diet over and over and over again. And you do not diet with any other plant that isn't like very energetically resonant with that tree. And there's only like a handful of plants that are considered resonant. Bobinsana, which is one of the ones I mentioned, is like resonant with this particular tree, for example. And if you were to diet with plants that are not resonant, then they clash inside of you and they create sickness or bad luck or like, effects that would not be desired by the practitioner, you know? So it's a whole world, and there's a lot of like knowledge and taboos that come with like knowing who to diet, when to diet, how to like keep your diets clean and straight. Like that's a whole language that we use down there about like, oh, my diet is a bit crossed. It's like, it's a bit obstructed. It needs to be cleared, cleaned, and straightened. And then when that happens, then I'm well in my body, and then I'm also much more effective for my patients in ceremony. Whereas like someone with a cross diet, if they sing an ikaro, it's like, oh God, like please stop singing. Something's not right here, you know, like you need to clear what's going on. Yeah.
And is that something that you could feel? So you as a practitioner or someone who's learning and studying and watching and paying keen attention, you would be able to get a sense of there's some dissonance in this song, or there's something here. Is it that palpable?
It is when you've got experience with it. Like I would say for folks who are fresh to this world, it's like sensitivity with wine tasting, for example. You know, it's like, yes, if I don't know wine, all wine's just wine, whatever, you know. But it's like the more you do it, the more sensitive you become, the more aware of distortions you become. The more you train, the more you diet, the more you see, the more you feel, you know, like there's an expansion in capacity to sense what's moving. And then you've got to be able to be trained to respond to what's moving. And sometimes that's an actual training that your teacher gives you. And sometimes it's something that the plants that you're dieting with, like they are our teachers also. So you have human teachers who are like showing you by example, and you're watching, like, you know, I watched my Shipibo teachers for years, straightening diets that were crossed and like helping people who were obstructed and like pulling out illness from people's bodies and like all that kind of stuff. And so you learn by listening and watching over and over again. But then also the plants, like once you've got a strong diet, then while you're working with someone, your diet can be like, hey, I'm crossed, you know, and so like help you to sing yourself straight. Like you can learn how to straighten yourself through their own instruction, which is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole, that could be probably an entire many-part podcast series on just this aspect.
Everything we're talking about could be, yeah.
Yeah, it's so rich and strange and beautiful and mind-bending, and like it makes me think, because when I was reading through the blogs that you have on this topic, which are very informative, very beautifully articulated, I really enjoyed going through them. I was thinking of, again, like these parallels between any type of like group energetic work and this, where I was wondering, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this, that like many Western practitioners of a type of energetic modality, even if it's not using psychedelics, because from what I gathered, ayahuasca and the psychedelic state is a minuscule aspect of what's involved. It's like some practitioners work with people without ayahuasca, and they could work on them and still have very powerful, profound shifts. So this was very illuminating to me, and it got me thinking that, okay, so in the West, when we're doing group work, whether that's like psychotherapeutic group work or psychedelic assisted group work or not, there are very real, very risky forces at play that don't get spoken about, that aren't even addressed, and maybe a lot of people aren't even aware of. And I got to thinking like, wow, I wonder if I have been the recipient of certain energetic attacks or weird things that were in the field as a result of people emptying things and letting them go and them coming out into the space. And, you know, because I've had weird things happen where like a kidney stone, the first and only kidney stone I've ever had, happened right at the end of a workshop. Like my last workshop that I did, I had like shingles erupt like on my eye. I had to leave in the workshop and go to the hospital. So I was like, wow, I wonder if there are weird energies at play here that I'm just totally defenseless against and ignorant of. And maybe I should take more care to look at proper protocols and guardianship and things like this to protect not just me as a space holder, but people in the space. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder what your thoughts are on this type of thing. I know that's a long question, but I think it needed a lot of context to explain it to someone who's just tuning in.
No, totally. And it's such a important area of inquiry. Yeah, there's kind of like two ways I look at this. There's the Westerners who are kind of going into these spaces and not quite aware, as you say, of what might be churning up and what they might be exposed to themselves. Because, you know, in the work that I was just talking about with the Curanderismo, when you're doing healing work like that, energetic often comes towards the practitioner. So we spend a lot of time cultivating guardianship and protective practices and relationships with the plants. Like we spend a lot of time setting up space energetically so that it's going to, like the vessel, the containing of the space is really important. But that is a particular kind of work. Like I think it really depends, because where this can also go, and this is something that I've seen a lot, is as soon as this topic is opened up, then a lot of Westerners fling to the other side, where they become really paranoid and like they're constantly fearful, you know. And like I said, I work with folks doing like level 1 animist relating in my study groups, which doesn't involve any psychedelics. It's involving a similar form of kind of like active imagination, like Jung's active imagination. The only difference really is that we're saying, no, we're not just talking to our personal unconscious, although that is there, but we're also communing with the plant that we're sitting in front of, right? And then people get really scared in a way that isn't necessary, in the sense that the work that we're doing there doesn't really require all the layers of protection and stuff like that. And, you know, if I think back to the Shipibo community that I was studying with, like a lot of people embody basic animist perception and are kind of like in relationship with other than humans and other humans, you know, in like these intimate ways without like layering up on protections all the time and all of that. So I think it depends on the nature of the kind of work that you're doing. Certainly, I would say in things like grief rituals, we want to have stronger energetic containment, more protections, like, you know, any ceremonies like inviting like big energies and like moving things out in a bigger way. Mm-hmm. Yes, I would say that a lot of Westerners are probably copying it in ways that they don't fully understand and could probably use some training in protection. And then on the other side, a really great guy, his name's Ben Joffe. He's a South African, but he's like deeply studied tantric practitioner of the Tibetan tantric traditions. And he was saying that something that he's noticed with the Westerners is that they just want more and more and more protections, where the Tibetans are like, oh yeah, I'm just going to like say this chant, ask for protection. And then they fully just trust that. And then they're fine, you know? Whereas we somehow don't know how to lean into like like sometimes it can seem too simple or too good to be true. Like, all right, I'm going to, you know, sing this mantra and I'm going to envision the space protected. Like I need armor. I need weapons, you know, like there's some part of us that wants to like weapon up, you know. And yet in spaces like the ayahuasca space, we do actually do that energetically. If you were to understand the first few icaros, what we're talking about is like, I'm moving the maloka, you know, the ceremony space into remote energetic mountain range. And then I'm surrounding it by 7 rivers and 7 forests and 7 layers of mountains. And I'm setting my protectors at the top and then protecting each one of your bodies. And then I'm laying all my like spike, you know, like it's like in-depth protection. and it's not just saying it, we're invoking it because there's an energetic from the plants that we've done dietas with, which offer us this particular protective, defensive energy through sound. So yeah, it depends, I guess, is my answer to that. And then I guess I wanted to speak to just one other thing that you spoke to about, how there's a lot of like the Shipibos, and I imagine some of the other traditions, though I haven't studied with them all in the jungle, like are treating a lot of local people without ayahuasca, without ceremony. It's like a lot of Westerners want that, expect that, demand that. So that's become part of the norm. But traditionally, it hasn't always been needed. Like you could sit with your practitioner and they drink medicine and sometimes not even that. And then they work with you with icaros and like prescribing medicines or treatments or behavioral changes. And that's really effective and powerful, partly, I believe, because there is still this basic ability to understand, feel, and perceive through what we have denigrated as the imaginal, like in the daytime. It's like, oh, that's just my imagination. But it's not. Like the sensory imagination is the pathway where people have these experiences and relationships and perceive the layers of the world. And in those traditions, almost everyone you meet will have a story like, oh, I went to the river the other day and there was a mist on the river and then I saw a mermaid, like a sirena. And you're like, but did you see it in a vision? Or was that a dream? And it's like a completely unimportant distinction. It's like, why would you even ask that question? I saw a sirena, like that's all you need to know, and she scared me, so I ran back home. And, like those kinds of stories are like daily, and there isn't such a strong distinction between real and imaginary. They interweave, Yeah. So
I think that's a great point. It reminded me of something that my friend had written one time to me. He wrote, all of us have our fears, both real and imagined. The more imagined, the more real. And there is something to, I thought it was a very beautiful articulation of this concept, because it's like, yeah, imagining something doesn't mean it's unreal. Like, in fact, the more deeply you imagine a thing helps to make it more real. And perhaps this is why in the Shipibo tradition, it's such an elaborate, imaginal invocation of protection compared to the thing where you're just saying, hey, come protect this space and trusting in it. Maybe one, like in writing, right? Some people like flowery purple prose, and some people like a more minimalist, just say what it is. And it just depends. Neither are wrong. They're both valid approaches. It just depends what works better for you.
Yeah, totally.
So that's what I was hearing when you were sharing that. And I like that. But there's a deeper thing that I wanted to go into that we're kind of skirting around that's been on my mind lately, which is like, you mentioned black magic, and we've been talking about healing magic, and we've been talking about energies, and we've been talking about plant spirits and this types of thing. And from an animist relational perspective, I would think that underneath those things, right? Like those things are like the mushrooms of like a deeper mycelial web of stuff that are happening, right? A more energetic, animate forces coming up through us or through a plant or through an intention. And I wonder, is this an accurate way to look at that? And if so, does that mean that there are some forces at a more foundational level that some of them are like nefarious and malevolent and some of them are caring and loving? I don't know. It's not really a fully formed question, but there's something about this that's stirring in what we've been speaking about, because it seems like there's something underneath the need for healing, right? Like there's something that's causing illness. So what is that stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. In the Shipibo tradition, they speak about all the plants having kind of what we might call dark and light qualities. Like plants can take us in both directions, and so it's kind of like up to the human that's working with them to come with their kind of ethical directionality. Which it's interesting because, as I said, I just finished this book by Robert Johnson talking about the inner work practices of the Jungians. And apparently Jung was very much like the active imagination is a high art that could be likened, Robert Johnson literally said it could be likened to a kind of magic. And it's really important that the person engaging in it has like a moral compass and center, which I just thought was really interesting because it can take you in all kinds of directions and places. So yeah, there's certain plants, like I said, that have these like this shitana, this kind of qualities of protectiveness that can, when accumulated in combination with, I guess, less savory moral directions, can take us to pretty dark places. And that's what we would call a brujo. And it's interesting because in those traditions, like envy is a force that can shoot darts into other people and cause them illness. And so that's like a major force that we work with in those traditions, is like pulling out or like removing envy darts from people's energetic field, and you can be like a lovely person and feeling like envious of your neighbor, and it's not like, it doesn't mean that you're messed up or evil or anything like that, but you can enact brujeria kind of unconsciously through your envy. Hatred can do that. Like all of those forces are seen to be able to like actually impact people and their energy, I guess, and their wellness, particularly if they're undefended for whatever reason or more vulnerable, So that's part of what we're working with, is like not always like someone setting out to be like a dark practitioner, but it's kind of ending up there through a sense of competition or power seeking or like undigested, envy is a big one. And then the plants like kind of responding to that and lending potency to someone's envy in such a way that it can cause another person harm. And, like then as a practitioner, you're working with the medicines and you're seeing, okay, this person is unwell at the moment because of this interaction with another person that they didn't even really know about, and now it's like your job as a practitioner to help unwind that. And then as part of that, they may have their own like, like this is something my teachers talk about, like how what we might call like dark entities or things like that, or like energetic attacks, almost always hook onto something within us that's kind of giving them the space to do that. Like, so some kind, like, that is our work. That is where I kind of like see the animist and like the psychotherapeutic, like inner work paradigms coming together, because there's always some kind of like unconscious resonant hook that allows things to come together in that way. And so, like part of your job is to identify that in your patient and also support their own journey or like balance seeking inside of themselves that makes them less vulnerable to those experiences in the first place, In terms of like actual evil and stuff, is that what you were kind of alluding to? Well, not so much.
In a way, I hate that word, but in a way, yes. Like, I guess if we step back from the practitioner perspective, and we think of an animist relational worldview, where things are passing through us, like we are nature experiencing itself, right? So anything that's inside of us is like a natural phenomenon or a natural force, including,
totally.
Violence, including hatred, including envy, all of these things that we're describing here that could be like called harmful or evil or malefic forces. And I guess my question is, what are those from an animist perspective? When you see someone like Trump or an Elon Musk, someone who is so motivated by ambition or power or humiliating others, or others who may be motivated by violence, if we don't look at them as a self-contained, isolated being with their own agency, but instead as a part of a vast, interconnected, animist relational whole, like, what is that phenomenologically? There's something moving through them. What is it?
I wish I knew. I feel like I'm kind of someone who has like one foot in the animist relational worlds, which is like just someone who, as I've described, like these are the, like I identify this other being here and there's an imbalance between the two beings and like actions are taken which are, you know, favorable or unfavorable, and we want to work with that. And then there's this like larger lens of, I guess you could say, like non-dual awareness, where for me all of this is just part of the dance of the whole. You know, like we live in a universe where sacrifice and violence and death and like that's it's here. It is part of nature. Like she devours. You know, I've actually just been reading Kali's stories recently, like her myths, and I love that there is an image of this creator goddess who's just like ripping in skulls and blood and like grotesque, and she's just like, there's just something so primal about that, and there's like a deep relief in me that there's an image of the divine, you know, that includes that, and that there's a tradition that includes that, and it's not just this like purity, you know, because it's the truth of the experience, right? Like this is, I grew up in South Africa where there's incredible inequality and a lot of violence. And, you know, like this was in my face from a very, very young age. And I feel like something that I've been metabolizing for my whole life, essentially. And there's something like there's a deep okayness, I feel, that I've experienced through the plants and the experiences that they've opened into me. Like there's the recognition that on this kind of more relative level, as I said, which is the level that Curanderismo is really working on, like there's an imbalance, there's something there, we need to like heal that and work with that and change that and balance that. And that's within this like a larger, that's held within a larger vision where even the discordant and the chaotic are part of it. You know, I don't know if you've ever read Tolkien's Silmarillion and his beautiful creation story. I really recommend it. And, you know, this is something that Josh Wright talks about in the Mythic Body a fair bit. But, you know, his creation story is amazing because you have this creator being who then creates what we might call the gods, you know, like these kind of like, he calls them the Valar, and each of them has like got a particular quality. And one of the beings that he creates, who happens to be one of the most powerful Valar, is this discordant being. And he's the one who, you know, creates all the darkness in the worlds to come, basically. And like the other Valar are like, oh, you know, like we need to defeat him or overcome him. And, you know, this guy's, and the creator's like, whatever he creates, like whatever he does, it's just part of the music. And you can see how, as it plays out later on, like it is what makes the story a story, you know? So yeah, for me, that is just like an essential part of that work, is like holding that paradox simultaneously, that unresolvable paradox, you know. I'm going to work on this problem and it's not actually a problem, you know. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question. Probably not. It's a very hard question to answer, but
yeah, it was an impossible question. It was more just putting it in the space to like poke at it, and yeah, it's we're not going to get an answer to that question. It's but I think your answer was beautiful, and it brought something very important to me, which is paradox. Yeah. And the necessity to hold both of those things at the same time, this non-dual awareness of everything being purposeful and everything having its place, and also, hey, let's adjust this imbalance here, because so often under modernity, we compulsively lurch for reconciling seeming contradiction. We want to just eradicate it and make it make sense, as though reality has to conform to or is constrained by human logic, which never made sense to me. But this talk of paradox, I think, is really at the heart of so much of like the mystic tradition and poetry and art and being alive, and even that existential crisis that you were speaking about towards the beginning of we are living and our death is looming constantly over us. And how do we reconcile this paradox? Am I living or am I dying? But it's both, always. And so yeah, paradox is something that I love and would be happy to speak more about if you want to. But there's also the topic of psychedelics and, psychedelics in terms of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy and trance states and porosity and things that can happen in those states, which is also interesting to me and also involves paradox. So I'm kind of in between these two worlds at the moment of where we want to move into. Does one of them speak to you more than the other?
I mean, I will just say something on the paradox, which is, the paradox and also this kind of learning to be with uncertainty, which I think is part of the feeling that paradox brings up in the soma,
Yes.
As you said, like this is so much at the heart of pretty much all the mystic traditions I've looked into. All the teachers that I really respect kind of point back towards this part again and again and again. It's like, can we sit in the tension of that paradox and just be with that? And I really feel like that's, in many ways, that's what this moment is asking us to do, like that we're in as a human species. And like the paradox for me of, Bio kind of spoke to it really beautifully. Like these times are urgent, but we must slow down, the sense of needing to act, but also recognizing that it's in the actually slowing down and like listening and making space and sitting in that tension where something completely different has the possibility of arising out of us that the very limited human imagination could probably not ever even begin to create, from the perspective that most of us are inhabiting on a daily basis, And so this invitation feels really important. And I agree, like we could just, that in itself is just like such a beautiful space to sit in and explore. Joanna Macy, she said, like, if you want to be an effective person in this moment, if you really want to be someone who's like an elder in the long dark, as Francis Weller calls it, then you need to learn. You need to let it to sit in the paradox. And yeah, I really resonate with that.
Yeah, beautifully said again, just giving it a little bit of space, because I think that is if people take one thing away from this conversation, I think that is a gem right there. So thank you for sharing that and drawing attention to it. And there was, because you just write about it so beautifully, I wanted to give you a little bit of time to speak about the stuff that you've written about psychedelics, as they have been kind of increasingly relegated to institutions and governments and the kind of, I mean, I don't think these are your words, but I'll do it. Like in a way, the psychologists and therapists have become sort of like the high priestess gatekeepers of psychedelics in a sense. But it's more complex than that, right? And so that's one framing, and it's not a complete framing. It's a very partial one. But I guess my question to you is, when we're speaking about psychedelics today, where, things like ayahuasca are so in vogue, and it sounds like even my Christian grandma wants to go and spend a weekend in the Peruvian Amazon taking ayahuasca, I think maybe some tempering and some nuance and some context should be provided, because often people don't have the relational context. And so, yeah, I just want to give you some space to unpack this stuff a little bit, because I wonder sometimes, like, is that just reproducing kind of extractive consumerist patterns? I'll stop talking now and give you the space.
Again, this could be a whole episode conversation in itself. There's a lot. I actually feel like sadness as you were sharing. And it kind of ties into that tension that we were just talking about, because I sit maybe in the center a little bit, in that being like traditionally animistically trained in that space, and like, you know, like it would be insane for someone with less than 5 years to hold that space to me, you know, like based on what I've experienced. Like I'm just like, whoa, I would never sit in a psychedelic space with someone who hadn't had some kind of training of that level. And so there's that part of me that's witnessing what's happening. And like you said, like, you know, psychotherapists, you know, I know folks who have got the green light to work with these medicines who've had like one experience. Some people have none. And some I have like had a couple. And I'm just like, you know, what? Like just because you know how to sit with people, which is a really valuable skill. And I don't want to downplay that at all. It's a very valuable skill. Like it doesn't mean that you know how to work with these spaces, you know. And yet I think that it would be great for more and more psychedelic facilitators to also have that skill. So I just want to say that, like, I think that they go really well together. But yeah, where do I want to go with this? I feel like there's kind of the two parts. There's the part of me that's lamenting it and feeling like there is this potentially hazardous extractive process happening where Indigenous knowledge is not being respected for what it brings, where it's being taken out of their hands, which is the hands that, in my opinion, they should be the ones leading us and guiding us now. That is my feeling. And then we meet halfway with the very specific skills that, you know, the Western mind needs to bridge, you know. But with what we're seeing is that being totally taken out, it's going into the hands of big organizations that are going to be profiting off of it in a massive way, already are, without the knowledge of these like subtle and not only knowledge but complete disregard of the reality of that world in the first place. Like as you said, like most people who just listen to what we spoke about will just think it's completely mad, you know. And I have like a very real grief around that and sadness around that. And then at the same time, I am of this feeling that like, who am I to say what should be happening right now? Like there are these larger waves passing through, and who am I to say that the plants are not actually orchestrating this in some way, you know? And I feel like as a species, we're at this moment where big shifts need to happen, and these medicines open the way for big shifts to happen very, very fast. Like I don't know of any kind of technology more effective at breaking through like the kind of worldview perceptual barriers than these medicines. And I don't know of anything more effective at like bringing people into strong encounters with like animate mystical heart of reality in such a rapid way. Of course, what we might see is another contraction like we saw after the 60s, which would be really sad. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels different now. Not that I was there, but from what I can tell, there could be some wisdom to this. And I generally am of the opinion that we should be cultivating trust with the waves of life, even when they're not going the way that we Skye thinks they should go. Like there's a much bigger story playing out here, you know. So from that perspective, this is a part of that paradox again. I feel that like, no, we need to be doing something. Like I want to be part of the force, and I am now. People are starting to like ask me to come and teach animism on their like, like psychedelic psychotherapy certifications and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know, but at least I can just bring this perspective in, and like we'll see like what effect it has. Maybe none at all. But you know, like that's what I want, to be that voice, someone who speaks to that, someone who brings awareness to that part that is being rapidly left behind to our detriment, I think. And then simultaneously cultivating whatever trust I can with the wave that's unfolding, and just seeing where it takes us, because what else can we do? Like, this is happening, regardless of my opinion about it, you know? Yeah. Very exciting, wild times to be alive. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess for people who may listen to this conversation and be curious, and maybe they don't have a strong animist sensibility. Maybe they think it's, you know, they're okay with having a psychedelic experience, but a lot of the other stuff we're talking about, they're not bought into it yet. They have doubts.
Yeah.
Which I can, you know, I can understand. What's some way that someone like that who may be entering into a space like this could reduce harm or have an experience that, I don't even know how to frame this question, because I guess what the intention behind it is concern for people who may go into a space like that with the wrong expectations or intentions that aren't set properly. Is there any kind of guidance that we could give a listener who may be considering taking their first ayahuasca ceremony?
In like a therapeutic setting or on their own, you're talking about?
Therapeutic or otherwise, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I think probably a lot of people would like to take it therapeutically, but maybe they don't have that option. Maybe they don't have the money, and their friend Charlie, who knows a guy can go do it in his garage, you know, and they're like, well, I guess I'm just going to go do it, which I think, sadly, that's probably happening for people.
There's lots of people doing that. Yeah. I know some. Yeah. What could they do? I mean, I would, like we spoke to really early on, like I feel like kind of really knowing that the water that you're swimming in as you approach the medicine is probably one of the most important things that you could do. Like, just come to understand the shape of the story that you were born into about what this life is, what's possible, what its, you know, limitations are, all of that. And like, know that that does impact the experience, particularly afterwards. Like, you know, the plants will show you what they show you, and they may strip that all away for a moment, or, you know, what might feel like an eternity. But, you know, when you come back, it's that story that you're bringing it back into, and that has implications. So, yeah, I would say that would be one of the most important things. And when you get to know that story, then you can start to like look at other ways that these medicines have been embedded in, and you don't have to buy it and you don't have to fully believe it. That's totally fine. But just kind of coming to understand the roots of how humans have perceived life before and how many indigenous societies do currently, and like the traditional settings that these medicines are embedded in, may give you some clues as to how to approach it. I mean, there isn't really... Yeah, there isn't like a whole like 5-step plan to like making it safe in that setting, because yeah, you can't replace that training and that awareness. You know, that's something that just comes with time and practice, and, you know, a lot of experience. But, you know, I do know some people who are self-initiated, like shamans, you know, garage shamans. We call them instant noodle shamans back in my home. Yeah, and some of them are really wise, and actually some of them are doing really good work, you know. And so I just want to say that too, because I know some really like wacky ones that shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and I know some other ones that I'm like, yeah, you didn't do that, and you're actually doing fine. In a way, it's kind of better than nothing. And there's a very particular service you're offering, and it would be great if you had some more training yourself, but the fact that you don't, like, you're coming with basic respect. You're listening to the land, you're honoring place, you're doing your like hodgepodge protections, and it's good enough, because it usually is, actually. I would say that as well, like depending on what you're working with, like the big guns are there for big issues, and they're actually relatively rare, I would say. So at least in my experience, they were. So a lot of the time people will be okay. I'm not saying do it, but yeah. My view is really nuanced around it. Like I don't feel like it deserves to be too black and white around it. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear like discernment, like people need
Yeah.
some discernment around this, which is a tricky thing because like you were talking about wine earlier, I thought that was a great metaphor. It's like at the beginning, before you've tasted a lot of wine, your discernment is usually poor, but
It's so
I guess
true.
that's the nature of it.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. As we're nearing the end, sadly, but I know it's getting late by you, so I don't want to keep you too long. I like to give the time back for something that maybe didn't come up, or something that stirred in you that you didn't find a conversational outlet for, or something that you have going on, or anything that's coming to you right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that was pretty good. I feel like we covered a lot of bases. There's so many like little things popping up now that would take us on a whole new tangent. So I guess just gratitude to you for all the things that you're doing and bringing in these different conversations and being open and asking good questions and letting the conversation flow where it goes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Skye, for the kind words and for your time and for the work that you do everywhere you do it. From everything you've written to the Mythic Body, to the courses you offer, to the time that you spent training and dedicating your time to this type of healing work. I think it's beautiful. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. I hope to do it again because I feel like each of these things was like a Russian doll of infinity. They could just keep going deeper and deeper into them. Like dreams where we started, I wanted to come back to, but never found a path back. So maybe I'll hold on to my dream of speaking to you again. And yeah, thank you for passing through with me.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
Thank you for passing through today. Yeah, you, dear listener. Thank you for your support, for your attention, for spending some time with me and this episode's guest. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe, rate it, like it, tell your friends about it, buy a billboard somewhere next to a highway promoting it. I mean, I'm kidding, of course, but your support really does mean a lot to me. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next time.